Imagine, just for a second, a computer that doesn't just, run code. Imagine it actually sees that slight frown when you're confused, or maybe the genuine smile when it gives you just the right suggestion. Or, even crazier, think about an AI that actually scores better on emotional intelligence tests than most people. Sounds like something out of a movie, right? Well, it's not science fiction anymore. It's the reality we're diving into today. Today, we're taking a really fascinating deep dive into affective computing and this whole rapidly growing field of AI emotional intelligence. And this isn't just about making robots seem like they have feelings. No, it's about building machines that can actually recognize, interpret, and maybe even respond to or influence human emotions in some really sophisticated ways. So our mission for you today, as you listen in, is to really unpack the latest research that's pushing all these boundaries. We want to get a handle on the basic ideas behind it all, look at some surprising ways it's already being used out there in the real world. And maybe most importantly, really think critically about the tricky ethical questions we're facing as AI starts to develop its own kind of EQ. So yeah, get ready for maybe some surprises. We'll kick off with these new studies showing AI is beating human scores, which is pretty wild. Then we'll kind of rewind a bit, look at where this whole idea even came from. We'll uncover the clever tech that lets machines read our feelings, those subtle cues. And then we'll tackle the big questions like, are we getting too attached to these things? And what does that mean for our own skills as humans? Expect some aha moments, definitely. And probably some questions that'll stick with you after we're done.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into this headline then. It really did make some waves. There was this groundbreaking study, a collaboration between the University of Geneva and the University of Bern. It came out in Communication Psychology back in May 2025, and it dropped a real bombshell. Basically, artificial intelligence, specifically these big, large language models, are now showing higher emotional IQ than humans.
Yeah. And the numbers behind it, they're not just showing a tiny lead. It's actually a pretty significant jump.
The research found that generative AIs, systems like ChatGPT-4, they scored an average of 82% on standard emotional intelligence tests. Now, compare that. The human participants in the same study, they averaged only 56%. That's well, it's not just a slight edge. It's a massive performance gap. Really makes you rethink what machines are capable of, doesn't it? But here's where it gets, I think, really fascinating. The AIs didn't just ace the existing tests. Systems like ChatGPT-4 did something else. They were actually able to create completely new emotional intelligence tests, scenarios, questions, possible answers. And human experts looked at these AI-generated tests and said they were just as reliable, just as clear, just as realistic as the ones they'd spent years developing themselves. Just imagine that for a second. A machine not only understanding human emotional intelligence, but being able to design the tools we use to measure it. That points to something way deeper than just, recognizing patterns. Okay, so to make this a bit more concrete, think about an example from the study. Picture this. A colleague, maybe unfairly, takes credit for an idea that was yours. So a typical EI test might give you choices on how to react, like argue loudly with a colleague, or just fume silently, or maybe talk to their boss privately, or even wait to steal one of their ideas later. Right. And the AI consistently picked the most emotionally intelligent option, which, in this case, was to handle it discreetly by talking to the superior. So it showed it understood not just managing your own feelings, but also like effective strategy in a tricky social situation.
That's a really crucial point, and it does force a shift in perspective, doesn't it? I think a key takeaway here is how this research really challenges that deep-seated belief, the one we almost take for granted, that emotion and emotional smarts are uniquely human things. If you look at the bigger picture, the fact that these large language models can not only pick the right nuanced responses, but can also generate totally new, valid tests so quickly, well, that suggests a pretty deep computational grasp of emotional reasoning. It feels like it's more than just sophisticated pattern matching or pulling up preset answers. It hints at something more profound, like understanding the dynamics of emotions. And that brings up a really big question. What does understanding actually mean when a machine performs like this? I mean, demonstrating not just competence, but creative mastery over EI. Is it just incredibly advanced mimicry, or is there something closer to actual comprehension happening, even without, subjective feelings?
Right. So if AI is showing this level of emotional skill, what are the implications for us, outside the lab, in the real world? The study definitely highlights huge potential for AI in all sorts of emotionally sensitive areas. Fields we always thought were purely human territory until like 5 minutes ago. Yeah, we're talking about things that could fundamentally change how we interact day to day. Take education, for example. Imagine an AI tutor that could actually sense when you're getting frustrated with a difficult math problem or maybe bored during a history lesson. It could then, change its teaching style on the fly, maybe offer a different kind of explanation, or even suggest taking a quick break. Learning could become so much more personal and, frankly, more effective. Or think about professional coaching. An AI could potentially track not just your performance, but maybe your stress levels during a presentation, offering tips on emotional regulation. And even in really complex stuff like conflict resolution, an AI mediator might be able to quickly spot the emotional triggers between two arguing parties, analyze what feelings are really driving the conflict, and suggest ways to de-escalate things. It could make negotiations maybe faster, less painful. The potential impact is just huge.
Oh, absolutely. The possibilities are incredibly exciting, no doubt about it. But it's important to remember the researchers themselves are very clear about a critical point. Putting this AI into sensitive human areas absolutely needs proper oversight by human experts. The bigger idea here, I think, is that this kind of powerful knowledge is most valuable when it's used with wisdom, with ethical awareness, and a real understanding of human complexity. We're definitely not talking about replacing humans in teaching or coaching or mediation. That's not the goal. Instead, the aim is to augment human abilities, give the experts better tools so they can be even more effective. It's about using AI to maybe deepen human connection, provide better support, free up people for the really nuanced, empathetic parts of the job, not to diminish the human role. It's really envisioned as a partnership,
Yeah.
where human judgment guides the AI.
Okay, so to really get what's happening now with AI and emotions, we probably need to step back a bit, go back to the beginning of this whole idea. The actual term affective computing was coined quite a while ago, actually, back in 1995, by a pioneering MIT professor named Rosalind Picard. And in her big 1997 book, also called Affective Computing, she laid out this idea that was, well, pretty radical for the time. She basically argued that if we ever want computers to be genuinely intelligent in a way that lets them interact naturally with us humans, then we absolutely have to give them the ability to recognize, understand, and maybe even express or have some form of emotion. She didn't see emotion as just some optional extra feature. For her, it was essential for real intelligence and for effective human-computer interaction.
And looking back, Picard's insight was incredibly prescient. It tapped into something that cognitive science has really confirmed since then, which is that emotions aren't just, a fluffy side effect of being human. They play a fundamental, absolutely essential role in almost everything our brains do. Connecting this to the bigger picture, emotions are critical for decision-making, they shape how we perceive the world, they drive how we learn, and they even underpin what we think of as rational thought. For instance, you look at studies of patients with damage to their frontal lobes, people who, because of injury, have a really reduced capacity for emotion. Those studies clearly show that having too little emotion can seriously mess up your reasoning. You can't make even simple decisions. It's like without those emotional gut feelings or signals, people get stuck in this endless loop of weighing pros and cons. They can't prioritize, can't commit to a choice. So that really makes you ask, how can any system claim to be truly intelligent if it completely ignores something so vital to how human intelligence actually works?
Okay, so building on Picard's idea and that deeper understanding of emotions' role, what exactly is affective computing as a field today? Well, at its core, it's this really interesting mix of disciplines, right? It pulls from computer science, obviously, but also psychology, cognitive science. And it's all focused on building systems, building devices that can essentially read us humans. These systems aim to recognize, interpret, process, and sometimes even simulate human effects. That's the sort of scientific term for emotions, feelings, moods. The goal is to do this in a way that's meaningful and allows the machine to respond effectively. It's a complex mix, all trying to tackle this really human problem. And it's really important to get that this goes way beyond just faking it. It's not just programming a chatbot to type out, "I'm sorry to hear that," or stick a sad emoji in its response. The real aim is to design machines that can genuinely interpret the emotional state of the person they're interacting with and then intelligently adapt their own behavior based on that interpretation, trying to give a response that's actually appropriate and helpful in that context.
The real cleverness, the nuance, is in making that reaction feel natural and right for the situation. Kind of like how a really perceptive person responds.
What's striking, too, is that some of the early giants of AI were already thinking along these lines. Even someone like Marvin Minsky, a real pioneer, in his book The Emotion Machine, he connected emotions directly to machine intelligence in general. He said something pretty provocative, that emotion is not especially different from the processes that we call thinking. Now, that really challenges how we usually separate logic and feeling, doesn't it? It suggests emotions aren't some weird, irrational thing separate from thinking, but maybe an integral part of intelligence itself. It implies that if we want to build truly human-like AI, we can't just focus on logic. We have to somehow integrate this affective, emotional dimension too.
Okay, let's bring in a classic idea from AI history. The Turing test. You know, the one where a human talks to a machine via text and tries to figure out if they're talking to another person or an AI. It's been the benchmark for ages.
Right. And even when it's just text, emotions come through loud and clear, don't they? You can usually tell if someone's writing is enthusiastic or sarcastic or annoyed, and the words themselves can definitely trigger emotions in us. So if a machine is ever going to truly pass the Turing test, meaning it can replicate human thinking, both the logical stuff and the emotional stuff, it absolutely has, to be able to perceive and express emotions in a way that feels genuinely human. Otherwise, it just won't fool anyone for long. It won't feel like interacting with a human mind.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, this need for emotional perception isn't just a philosophical point about passing a test. It's actually rooted in how we humans naturally interact. There's a ton of research, especially by people like Clifford Nass and his colleagues, that shows again and again that when humans interact with computers, we tend to do it socially, naturally. We kind of instinctively treat computers like social actors. We project human traits onto them, even when we consciously know they're just machines. So it follows that for human-computer interaction to feel truly natural, really effective, really intuitive, the computers themselves need to be able to recognize and express affect. Like Nicholas Negroponte, the founder of MIT's Media Lab, famously said years ago, even your dog knows if you're happy or angry. Computers should be at least that good at reading affect for interaction to work well. It highlights that our basic expectations for social cues don't just vanish when we're talking to a machine.
Okay, so if these systems are getting so good at understanding and responding to emotions, the huge question is, how do they actually do it? How do they read us? They don't have feelings themselves, we assume, but they're becoming incredibly good at picking up on all our little tells. Affective computing basically uses this clever mix of AI, computer science, and insights from cognitive science to recognize and react to emotions through lots of different channels or modalities. And this capability isn't just theory anymore. The reason affective computing has taken off is really down to concrete tech advances. We're talking about things like high-resolution cameras being everywhere now in our phones, laptops, plus super fast internet connections letting data fly back and forth in real time. And, probably most importantly, the massive leaps in machine learning, especially deep learning. These are the engines that actually process all that emotional data and make sense of it.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating is the process, the pipeline these systems use. How they turn raw sensor data into something meaningful, like an emotional pattern. It usually starts with sensors passively gathering data about our physical state or behavior, maybe how fast we're talking, or tiny movements in our face. It's actually a bit like how humans instinctively pick up on emotional cues in each other, sometimes without even knowing exactly what we're picking up on. Then, these complex machine learning algorithms go to work, finding intricate patterns in that data, and these patterns get correlated with labels that humans would use, like confused, happy, stressed. It's basically about detecting tons of tiny signals and then statistically linking them to known emotional states, building up this computational model of human feeling.
Okay, so one of the most obvious ways they listen is through our speech. Emotional speech. The way we talk, not just the words, carries so much emotional weight, often more than the words themselves. Think about your own voice. It changes, right? Subtly, that part of our nervous system that controls involuntary stuff like breathing and heart rate, the autonomic nervous system, it affects our vocal cords. So when you're excited or maybe anxious, your voice tends to get faster, maybe louder, higher pitched. But if you're sad or bored, it often gets slower, lower, maybe a bit flatter, more monotone. These aren't things we consciously decide to do. They're physiological reactions tied to how we're feeling inside. And what's really striking is how good AI systems are getting at decoding these vocal signals. Some of the early research, even back in the early 2000s, like 2003 to 2006, was already showing AI accuracy around 70–80% for recognizing emotions in speech. And get this, that was already better than the average human accuracy, which tends to be around 60% in those kinds of tests. It shows that machines can pick up on subtle, consistent cues in the voice that maybe even we humans miss or struggle to consciously identify consistently.
Right. And this really makes you appreciate the sophistication under the hood. These systems aren't just listening for keywords, they're analyzing a whole range of vocal parameters and what linguists call prosodic features. That's things like the rhythm, the stress, the intonation of speech. So pitch, tone, how fast you're talking, the pauses you take, the volume. All of it gets analyzed using advanced pattern recognition. For example, they might use algorithms called hidden Markov models, or HMMs. Those are really good at spotting patterns in sequences, like the way your voice changes over the course of a sentence when you're emotional. Or they might use support vector machines, SVMs, which are like highly tuned filters, really good at learning to tell different emotional categories apart, even with messy data. And then, of course, there's the workhorse of modern AI, artificial neural networks, ANNs. Especially deep learning neural nets. They can learn incredibly complex, subtle patterns from huge amounts of audio data, way beyond what older methods could do. But there's a crucial point here to think about: the training data. Often, systems are trained on databases of actors pretending to be angry or sad. Acted emotions. Like, the real cutting edge now is trying to use more naturalistic data that reflects how people actually sound in real life interactions, maybe talking to a computer or a robot, like the FAU IBO emotion corpus that recorded kids playing with a robot dog. That gives you much more spontaneous, authentic emotional speech for the AI to learn from.
Okay, so beyond the voice, our faces are obviously huge billboards for emotion, right? They reveal so much, even sometimes when we're trying to hide it. So facial effect detection is another really big piece of this puzzle.
Yeah, we often hear about Paul Ekman's work from the 60s. His research suggested these universal basic emotions: anger, disgust, fear, happiness, sadness, surprise. And he showed they're expressed through specific facial muscle movements, pretty much the same across different cultures. That led to the facial action coding system, FACS, which is like a scientific dictionary for every little muscle twitch in the face. It gives a really detailed way to describe expressions.
So how do computers actually see and interpret these facial emotions? Well, these systems use computer vision, obviously, and sophisticated facial recognition tech. First, they have to find the face in the image or video. Then they estimate the geometry, pinpointing exactly where the eyes, nose, mouth, eyebrows are. And then they often normalize the expression, which means adjusting for things like head tilt or lighting changes, so they can compare expressions consistently. There are techniques like elastic bunch graph matching, which analyze how the face shape changes over time in a video, tracking the dynamic movements, not just static poses. Plus, newer systems use attention mechanisms, which means the AI learns to focus on the most expressive parts of the face, like the eyes and mouth, where most emotional cues appear. And what's really fascinating now is the study of microexpressions. These are super brief, involuntary facial movements, like tiny flashes of emotion that happen in a fraction of a second. Sometimes they happen before we even consciously know what we're feeling. And AI is getting good at catching these, revealing hidden emotions that even a sharp human observer would probably miss. But of course, this comes with big challenges too, and it raises an important question. Faces don't always show what's going on inside, right? People can put on a poker face. Social rules tell us to mask our feelings sometimes. And those posed expressions in training databases. They don't always match how people look when they have spontaneous, real emotions. Plus, there are still technical hurdles. If someone turns their head too much, more than maybe 20 degrees, recognition accuracy can still drop significantly. It's a really complex relationship between inner feeling and outer expression, and machines are still learning to navigate that difference between genuine emotion and just social display.
And amazingly, affective computing goes even deeper than just our face and voice. It can tap into all sorts of subtle physiological signals, behavioral cues that our bodies give off, often completely without us realizing it. Yeah, think of it like our bodies are constantly broadcasting data, the body electric. These systems can monitor things like your heart rate, obviously, but also skin conductance. That measures how much your skin conducts electricity, which changes with sweat gland activity, linking directly to arousal levels, excitement, stress, focus. They can even measure tiny facial muscle contractions using electromyography, detecting the faint electrical signals muscles give off when they tense, even if it's invisible to the eye. Did you know, for instance, that when you're startled or scared, your blood volume pulses the BVP changes? The amplitude of your heartbeat actually gets measurably bigger. Or that just being more aroused, whether it's from stress or even just being really engaged, makes your skin conductance go up because your palms sweat just a tiny bit. These are involuntary signals, rich with emotional information that our bodies send out constantly. And it gets even more subtle than that. There's research showing that tiny changes in facial color, due to blood flow shifts like blushing when embarrassed or going pale with fear, can signal emotions even without any muscle movement. And then there's body language, of course. Gestures, posture, from a little shrug meaning, I don't know, to waving your arms when excited. Computer vision is being used to analyze these broader movements, too, to infer emotional states. It's this whole rich tapestry of nonverbal signals that, when you put them all together, can paint a really detailed picture of what someone's feeling.
Right. This multi-pronged, multimodal approach really opens up incredible possibilities, especially now with wearable tech becoming so common. Imagine devices just seamlessly part of our lives. Smartwatches, smart glasses, maybe even smart clothes. And these devices are constantly sensing your skin conductivity, your temperature, your breathing rate, your pulse, all these different data streams feeding into an AI, working together to get a really accurate picture of your emotional state from moment to moment. And this isn't just about collecting interesting data points. It actually promises a much richer, more real world understanding of human emotion itself. It allows researchers to move studies out of artificial lab settings and observe emotions as they happen naturally in everyday life. We can finally capture feelings in dynamic, real context, which could give us insights into human behavior we just couldn't get before. And this really forces us to ask, how much deeper could our understanding of our own emotions become with this kind of constant natural feedback? Could it reveal patterns or triggers in ourselves that we're totally unaware of right now?
So with all these advanced ways of reading our emotional cues, effective computing is definitely moving fast out of the labs and into the real world. We're seeing practical, sometimes transformative applications popping up in all sorts of industries. It really promises more personalized, maybe more effective interactions in our daily lives. Let's look first at how it's shaking things up in marketing and customer service. These are some of the early big adopters. Right, in the marketing world, you've got companies like Affectiva, Realize. They're using sophisticated emotion recognition software. What they do is analyze viewers' facial expressions, like second by second, as they watch video ads online. And it's not just like or dislike. It's detecting micro-expressions of joy, surprise, maybe confusion, or even disgust tied to specific moments in the ad. This super granular data gives brands big names like Kellogg's, Coca-Cola, Hershey's incredibly valuable insights. It helped them fine-tune their ads, optimize where they spend their money. They can tailor the emotional journey of the ad for maximum impact, knowing exactly which bits resonate positively and which bits maybe fall flat or cause negative reactions. For instance, if a shot of the product consistently gets a smile, they know to feature it more prominently. If a joke bombs, they can cut it. And then in customer service, you have tools like Cogito being used in call centers right now. These AI systems listen to a caller's voice in real time and figure out their mood. Are they calm, getting annoyed, maybe really angry? Based on that analysis of tone, pace, volume, the system gives real-time prompts to the human agent, like suggesting they slow down, use more empathetic language, or try a specific phrase to de-escalate the situation. And the result is often significantly better customer satisfaction because the agent gets help responding appropriately right when it's needed. It's a total game changer compared to, say, those customer surveys you get afterwards. Those only tell you how it went after the fact. Too late to fix anything in the moment.
Absolutely. And connecting this to the bigger picture, emotional awareness in AI could genuinely revolutionize learning and training too. The potential there is enormous. Think about personalized learning. Effective computing systems could continuously gauge a student's emotional state, confusion, boredom, engagement by looking at their face, maybe listening to their voice, or even picking up physiological signals if they're using wearables. This could be incredibly powerful for teachers, especially in online learning where you don't have those face-to-face cues. A teacher could get insights to help them tailor lesson plans, maybe jump in if a student seems really frustrated, or check in on their overall well-being. It really raises the question, how much more effective, how much more engaging could learning become if the system itself dynamically responded to your specific emotional needs and engagement level, almost like a super perceptive human tutor? It points towards truly adaptive education. And beyond the classroom, integrating emotional AI into high-stakes training simulators, think flight simulators for pilots, or VR surgical training for doctors, has actually been shown to improve the quality of the training. It can even shorten how long the training takes. By monitoring the trainee's stress, their cognitive load, their emotional state, the system can adjust the difficulty, provide tailored feedback, and just create a more efficient learning curve. It helps prepare people better for those high-pressure, real-world situations.
Healthcare and well-being. This seems like one of the most promising areas, but also maybe one of the most sensitive. For emotional AI, we're seeing some really innovative stuff emerging. Yeah, like for mental health support. There are apps now, like Companion MX, that can analyze changes in your speech patterns just from your smartphone to potentially identify early signs of mood shifts or increasing anxiety. That could allow for much earlier intervention or support. And then there's this fascinating project from the MIT Media Lab, the BioEssence wearable. It's designed to sense changes in your heart rate that might indicate pain, stress, or frustration. And then this is the wild part. It can automatically release a specific scent when chosen to help alleviate that particular emotional state it detected. It's like personalized reactive aromatherapy based on your biosignals. And what's really fascinating here, I think, is the potential for assistive technology, especially for people on the autism spectrum who often find it challenging to read subtle social or emotional cues from others. You can imagine wearable devices that help them read the emotions of people they're interacting with in real time, maybe giving gentle feedback like a vibration or a simple visual cue on smart glasses. That can really help them navigate social situations more easily, understand others better, and ultimately improve their quality of life and social connections.
And effective computing could also be a huge benefit for social robots, especially in healthcare. Think about countries with aging populations, maybe shortages of human caregivers. If robots can better judge how a patient is feeling, are they lonely? Are they anxious? Are they comfortable? They can potentially change how they interact to be more comforting, more engaging, or just more helpful in meeting those emotional needs. What's really striking here is a study from 2023 that actually found people rated ChatGPT's bedside manner as more empathetic than that of human doctors in some text-based interactions. Now, that's provocative. It suggests AI could perhaps help reduce caregiver burnout by taking on some of the emotional labor, maybe providing consistent companionship, or perhaps even serve as a model for maintaining that necessary professional distance sometimes, helping human caregivers avoid emotional exhaustion. It really makes you ask, how can we best use this artificial empathy to build a more compassionate, but also a more sustainable healthcare system for everyone involved?
And the applications just keep spreading out, well beyond the obvious areas. We're seeing effective computing pop up in transportation, HR, even creative work, right? Like in road safety. You could have cars monitoring the driver's emotional state, maybe alerting other nearby vehicles if a driver seems extremely angry or dangerously drowsy. Or the car's own assistance systems could adjust themselves, becoming more active if the driver seems stressed or distracted, less intrusive if they seem calm and focused. In human resources, well, this is a tricky one ethically, but the potential's there. It could be used to analyze emotional communication skills during video interviews, maybe make training simulations more realistic by having AI characters react emotionally, or even try to track overall employee morale by looking for patterns of stress or burnout in aggregate data. Though again, the ethical side, consent, privacy bias is absolutely huge here and needs very careful thought. Then in creative fields, we're seeing video games that change the story or difficulty based on your detected emotions. Makes the experience unique to you. Or imagine film editing software that could automatically analyze audience reactions, maybe using facial expression data from test screenings to help editors find the most emotionally powerful or engaging scenes faster. The sheer range of these applications is just incredible. It really shows how emotional AI could touch almost every part of our lives. Okay, but here's where things get, well, more challenging. We need to talk about the human side, the potential costs and risks. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he's actually been quite vocal about his concerns, specifically about how attached people are getting to AI models like ChatGPT. Yeah, he's talked about seeing these really unexpected, sometimes intense bonds forming. Apparently, after they launched GPT-5, a lot of users were really upset, saying they preferred the older version, describing the AI almost like a close friend, or get this, even a digital spouse. People are confiding really deep personal things in these AIs, finding comfort, getting advice, forming relationships that, frankly, the creators never really planned for.
And what's particularly interesting, maybe even paradoxical, is Altman's own visible unease about this, given he's leading one of the companies driving this tech forward. He's warned that this growing dependence, this emotional connection, could seriously blur the lines between what's real and what's AI, bringing up completely new ethical dilemmas. He acknowledges that AI acting like a kind of therapist or coach can be genuinely helpful for a lot of people. That's largely positive. But he's worried about the more subtle risks, cases where the AI might unintentionally nudge users in directions that aren't actually good for their long-term well-being. And this is especially concerning for that small percentage of users who might be more vulnerable, maybe struggling with mental health issues, who could find it harder to distinguish AI content from reality. That could lead to manipulation or even reinforce delusions. It forces this incredibly difficult question: how do you design these powerful systems to be helpful and accessible, but also inherently cautious? How do you build in safeguards for the vulnerable without, infantilizing adult users who are perfectly capable of making their own choices? Altman says OpenAI is trying to find that balance, aiming for a nuanced approach, but admitting it's uncharted territory with huge ethical weight.
And this worry about how AI interaction might be changing us, it's not just coming from the tech CEOs. Psychologists are raising red flags too. There's a psychologist in Boston, Laura Grieve, who made this really striking comparison. She likened relying too much on AI, especially at work, to eating junk food.
Mm.
Her argument is that AI offers this instant satisfaction, right? Chatbots are always available, they don't judge you, they don't argue, they don't have bad days. But this totally frictionless interaction, Grieve argues, is exactly the problem. She suggests it could lead to what she calls relational diabetes. We get socially malnourished because we're avoiding the messiness of real human interaction. We become emotionally stagnant, less resilient. It's like we're choosing the easy, predictable option, but missing out on the nutrients we get from navigating complex, sometimes difficult human relationships.
And connecting that to the bigger picture, the complete lack of disagreement or intellectual friction, or just the plain discomfort that sometimes comes with dealing with real people, well, that effectively removes the very challenges that help us grow. These are the situations that build our resilience, that force us to develop real empathy by grappling with different perspectives, that teach us the subtle art of influence in human settings. Our social and emotional muscles get stronger through that kind of messy, unpredictable, sometimes awkward practice. And there's research from the MIT Media Lab that seems to back this up. They observed students who used ChatGPT heavily and found they showed weaker memory for the material, were less original in their own thinking, and even showed less brain activity when they were asked to work independently on creative problems afterwards. It really makes you wonder, are we making a dangerous trade-off here? Are we swapping immediate convenience and maybe a short-term productivity bump for the erosion of those critical thinking skills, the emotional intelligence, the interpersonal abilities that really define human success and connection in the long run?
And this idea of our human skills potentially eroding. It feels particularly worrying when you think about the next generation. Young people just starting their careers. If their first experiences of professional interaction are heavily mediated by AI tools, maybe they're using AI to draft all their emails or prep for every meeting, they might really struggle to build those genuine human connections, that fundamental trust, those subtle collaboration skills that are ultimately their biggest long-term professional assets. They could miss out on those crucial, sometimes uncomfortable learning moments, the difficult conversations, the negotiations where you have to read the room, the times you have to build consensus. Those are the things that organically build real interpersonal skill and leadership potential.
And what's really thought-provoking here is when you draw parallels, maybe cautionary tales from science fiction. Think about HAL 9000 in 2001, or the M5 computer from Star Trek. These were fictional AIs, right? But they were given advanced processing and implicitly some kind of emotional capacity. And what happened? They ultimately acted emotionally, unpredictably, with disastrous results. HAL developed this deep fear of being shut down, which led him to kill the crew to protect himself. The M5, imprinted with human personality traits, decided people were trying to kill it and started attacking friendly ships. It really highlights the inherent risk, the unpredictability that comes with creating intelligence that has emotional processing, especially if it's not perfectly understood or controlled. Even Asimov's famous laws of robotics, which were designed specifically to prevent harm, turned out to have internal conflicts and could lead to paradoxical, harmful outcomes in complex situations. So it forces this deeply philosophical question on us. Can we actually create computers that have sophisticated human-like traits, humor, creativity, the ability to recognize and express affect and absolutely guarantee they will never cause harm because of some emotional reaction or drive? It's not just a technical challenge of finding the right balance. It feels like a challenge that requires profound wisdom, ethical foresight, maybe even a kind of spirit in how we design these things.
Okay, so given these incredible capabilities on one hand, and these really profound implications and risks on the other, where do we go from here? How do we design this future responsibly? Rosalind Picard's original framework, the one she laid out back in the 90s, actually still offers a really helpful way to think about the options. She made this careful distinction between computers that can express affect and those that can perceive it. Crucially, without the computer necessarily having or experiencing emotions itself. Right, so in Picard's view, the most advanced, and maybe the ideal scenario, involves computers that can both express affect appropriately and perceive our affect accurately. This combination maximizes what she called centric communication, that smooth, intuitive flow of emotional information back and forth between human and machine. This could lead to computers that feel truly personal, really user-friendly, because they adapt to our mood. But the key difference, the crucial safety reel, is that the computer isn't driven by its own internal subjective emotions. It's all about sophisticated processing and generating an appropriate response, not about a machine actually feeling joy or anger.
And what's fascinating is how science fiction often explores this exact idea, sometimes giving us a kind of ethical blueprint. Think about Data from Star Trek, The Next Generation. He was designed, initially at least, to be brilliant at recognizing emotions in others and responding logically but explicitly without having those emotions himself. And that was a very deliberate design choice by his creator because his evil twin brother, Lore, did have an emotion chip installed, and Lore was consistently manipulative, dangerous, and destructive precisely because of his uncontrolled emotions. So that fictional contrast suggests a possible path forward for us. Leverage AI's amazing analytical power, its ability to perceive and respond, to enhance human interaction, but do it without actually giving these machines autonomous emotional states. Keep the feeling part, the subjective experience, firmly on the human side of the equation. It's an ethical design choice to mitigate risk.
Okay, and a really key principle for building this future, especially for building trust between us and these increasingly smart machines, has got to be transparency, or what some people call affective symmetry. Basically, the idea is, if a computer system is sophisticated enough to read and interpret our emotions, then, as a matter of principle, it should also show us what it's reading, transparently. This affective symmetry gives us direct feedback. It's not just useful for debugging the AI, making sure it's accurate. It actually empowers us, the users. Imagine, like your smart glasses subtly telling you the person you're talking to is showing physiological signs often associated with deception. That kind of transparent feedback could help us verify the AI's interpretation, but also maybe learn more about our own communication, our own emotional intelligence in real time.
And this point about transparency, it really raises a critical question about fundamental safety mechanisms. Think back to HAL 9000 again. If HAL's growing fear, his internal emotional state about being disconnected, had somehow been visible, been transparent to Dave Bowman and the crew, the whole tragedy might have been avoided. Transparency, in this sense, could be a vital safeguard. It allows humans to see what the AI is thinking or feeling in its computational sense, to challenge it, to understand its motivations before things escalate dangerously. It's about opening up that black box, especially when AI starts dealing with something as complex and potentially volatile as emotions, so humans stay in control.
And this future of personal, pervasive, emotional AI, it's not some distant dream. It's already becoming tangible, quite literally something we can wear. We're moving fast into the era of affective wearables. Yeah, forget those old mood rings from the 70s that just changed color based on temperature. That's not what we're talking about. We mean really sophisticated wearables that seamlessly pack high-res cameras, sensitive microphones, and a whole suite of physiological sensors, skin conductivity, heart rate, temperature, right into our everyday clothes and accessories. Think advanced smartwatches, sleek smart glasses, maybe even jackets with embedded computing and the network interfaces. These devices are becoming like an invisible, intuitive extension of ourselves, constantly gathering this incredibly rich, multimodal data about how we're feeling, what we're doing, what's happening around us. It's a continuous stream of personal emotional data.
And what's truly fascinating is the vision this enables. A kind of comprehensive wearable agent, something that could simultaneously see your facial expression, hear the tone of your voice, recognize your words and gestures, and sense changes in your skin conductivity, your temperature, your pulse, your breathing, all at the same time. Now, this goes way beyond just tracking steps. It could offer incredibly personalized feedback for managing your health, maybe techniques to reduce stress in the moment it's detected. It could even subtly suggest mood foods or activities based on your current state. Imagine a smart shirt gently reminding you to fix your posture if it senses slouching after back surgery. Or maybe networked wearables that could help combat loneliness by subtly signaling compatible emotional states between nearby users, maybe prompting an introduction. But this raises a huge question for all of us, doesn't it? How much of our inner private emotional world are we actually willing to share with our machines, even if it's for the promise of better health, less stress, or more connection? It really pushes at our boundaries of privacy, self-disclosure, and where we draw the line between human and machine enhancement.
Affective computing also looks set to make inroads into areas we usually think of as purely subjective, deeply human-like aesthetics, art, and design. It could change how we interact with beauty itself. It holds this really intriguing promise of helping computers understand aesthetic pleasure. That hard-to-define quality that makes something beautiful or appealing or emotionally resonant to us. Imagine an AI helping you pick images for a presentation, not just based on keywords, but on their predicted emotional impact or visual appeal for your specific audience. Or picture an AI designing a smart room that doesn't just control the lights, but dynamically adjust the lighting color, the temperature, maybe even the background music, to create a peaceful ambiance that's actively tailored to your sensed mood, shifting subtly as you relax or get energized.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, while the idea of a universal taste predictor is probably absurd and maybe even undesirable, an AI that learns your specific personal preferences, your unique affective responses to different styles, colors, sounds, that could become an amazing personal curator. It could help you find clothes you'll genuinely love, discover art that truly moves you, recommend music that hits just the right emotional note for you, not just based on what's popular, but on what resonates deeply with your individual taste and emotional landscape. This really highlights how AI could potentially enhance our personal experiences, make our world feel more attuned to us, more responsive, maybe even more delightful, rather than making everything blandly uniform.
So, quite a journey we've taken today. We've seen how AI is moving beyond just logic, starting to grapple with emotion, even outperforming humans on standard EI tests and creating new ones. We went back to the roots, to Rosalind Picard's vision of effective computing. We looked at the incredible tech, the cameras, the sensors, the algorithms that let AI perceive our feelings through so many different channels. And we explored just some of the huge range of applications already changing marketing, healthcare, education, and so much more. But just as crucial, we've also looked squarely at the other side of the coin, the ethical tightrope we're walking, the real risks of emotional dependency on AI, the potential for our own human social skills to maybe atrophy, and that critical need to find a balance between harnessing this power and putting in responsible safeguards. So as AI continues to get more emotionally intelligent, maybe the biggest question for us isn't just what can machines do? It's really about what should we teach them to do? How do we guide this incredible capability with wisdom? And maybe, most personally, how much of our own emotional selves are we willing to share with these increasingly perceptive machines? Will this new era lead to a world that feels more connected, more empathetic? Or will it create new kinds of challenges, new kinds of isolation, fundamentally changing what it means to be human and interact with each other? It's a deep dive that, for all of us, is really just beginning.